Have you ever wondered how a civilization that began as a humble city-state founded on shared power and civic duty transformed into an empire ruled by a single man with the authority of a god? It's one of the greatest political shifts in human history, and it didn't happen overnight. It happened through centuries of ambition, reform, betrayal, bloodshed, and hard-earned lessons, woven into the rise and fall of what we call the Roman Republic and the birth of the Roman Empire. To truly understand it, we must walk in the footsteps of Roman senators, tribunes, generals, and we must listen to the voices echoing through the marble halls of the Curia, hear the chants in the Forum, and feel the tension in the streets of Rome as power slowly slipped from the many to the hands of the few. This is the story of Roman politics from republic to empire, and it begins with an oath made under the shadow of a fallen king. It was 509 BCE, when Rome's last king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, was overthrown. He was arrogant, cruel, and deeply unpopular, but it was the violation of a noblewoman named Lucretia that broke the people's silence. Her suicide, after being assaulted by the king's son, ignited a fire of resistance. A nobleman named Lucius Junius Brutus stood before the people and vowed never again to allow a monarch to rule Rome. His words weren't empty. The monarchy was abolished, and in its place, a republic was born, from the Latin res publica, the public thing, ruled not by kings, but by laws, not by birthright, but by election, at least in theory. Power was now held by two annually elected consuls, checked by the Senate, advised by various and balanced somewhat by the tribunes of the plebeian. It was a structure meant to protect liberty and prevent tyranny. But while this system had balance on parchment, in practice, it was riddled with inequity. The patricians, the elite landowners, held the real power. The plebeians, the common folk, had to fight for every scrap of political voice. For centuries, this uneasy balance shaped the republic. There were victories. Rights expanded. Tribunes gained more authority. Laws were codified. But the real test came not from within Rome's walls, but from beyond them. As Rome expanded across Italy, and then across the Mediterranean, the republic began to change. Wealth flooded into Rome. Conquered lands were worked by slaves. Generals returned with spoils of war and ambitions far greater than tradition allowed. One of the earliest signs of strain came with the brothers Gracchus, first Tiberius, then Gaius tribunes, who dared challenge the elite. They called for land reform, for grain subsidies, for the return of dignity to the Roman poor. Their message was popular, their ends perhaps noble, but their means circumventing Senate authority set off alarm bells. The Senate responded with force. Tiberius was clubbed to death. Gaius committed suicide amid a bloody purge. These events didn't just silence the reformers, they broke a taboo. Violence had now entered politics, and once it did, it never truly left. As the republic stumbled forward, new figures emerged. Ambitious, charismatic, and deeply aware that the system could be manipulated. Gaius Marius, a self-made man, rose through military success and brought in professional soldiers, loyal not to Rome, but to him. His rival, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, marched on Rome itself, something unthinkable in earlier times. He seized power, rewrote laws, and declared himself dictator. A term that originally meant a temporary leader in times of crisis had now been twisted into a tool of control. Sulla eventually stepped down, but the damage had been done. The precedent was set, and then came Julius Caesar. He was brilliant, eloquent, ruthless, and immensely popular. His conquest of Gaul made him a hero to the people and a threat to the Senate. When ordered to disband his army and return to Rome, Caesar made his decision on the banks of the Rubicon River. He crossed it, a declaration of war against the Republic. The civil war that followed ended with Caesar's victory. The Senate, broken and fearful, named him dictator for life. But not everyone accepted this. In 44 BCE, on the Ides of March, Caesar walked into the Senate house and never walked out. A group of senators, calling themselves the Liberators, stabbed him 23 times beneath the statue of Pompey. They claimed to restore the Republic, but the Republic was already beyond saving. Caesar's assassination unleashed another storm. His adopted heir, Octavian Just, 18 years old, formed a fragile alliance with Mark Antony and Lepidus. The Second Triumvirate was a legal, brutal dictatorship. Enemies were purged. The Senate was sidelined. Eventually, as always, alliances fractured. Mark Antony aligned himself with Cleopatra of Egypt, a move Octavian masterfully used to his advantage. He painted Antony as a traitor, a man seduced by a foreign queen. In 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium, Octavian crushed Antony and Cleopatra's forces. The two lovers later took their own lives, and Octavian stood alone. But he didn't call himself king. He was too smart for that. In 27 BCE, he presented himself as the humble restorer of the Republic. The Senate gave him a new title, Augustus, meaning the revered one. He retained control of the military, the provinces, and vast financial power. He wore the cloak of the Republic, but underneath, he ruled like an emperor. And so, The Roman Empire was born not with a bang, but with a clever compromise. What followed was a period of relative peace known as the Pax Romana. For over 2 centuries, emperors ruled Rome, some wise, some wicked. The Senate remained, but its power was a shadow. The people still cheered, but their voice had little weight. Laws were still passed, but authority flowed from the emperor's will. Yet even in the imperial system, echoes of the republic remained. The idea of shared governance, of law over tyranny, lingered like a ghost in the marble. So what really changed? The republic was built on a delicate balance of ambition and restraint. The empire accepted that ambition would win, and tried to control it through structure and spectacle. Under the republic, the greatest danger was gridlock. Under the empire, it was a bad emperor. The republic depended on virtue, on men like Cincinnatus, who gave up power willingly. The empire depended on order, on men like Augustus, who kept power hidden behind tradition. But both systems were deeply Roman. Both were born of a city that revered strength, valued legacy, and feared chaos above all. Over time, the people came to trade liberty for stability. And who can blame them? After decades of civil war, famine, and fear, Augustus offered peace, prosperity, and pride. Still, some Romans looked back with longing. The Republic, for all its flaws, had allowed for debate, for dissent, for the idea that no one man was above the law. Cicero, the great orator and staunch defender of the Republic, once said, "The closer the collapse of an empire, the crazier its laws." He died for his words, executed during the rise of the but history remembers him. And perhaps that is the real legacy of the Roman political experiment, not the system itself, but the eternal question it posed: can freedom and power truly coexist? Rome tried to answer that question. It soared, stumbled, adapted, and fell. And in doing so, it left behind lessons that still speak to us today in our cities, our laws, our governments, and our ambitions. If you felt the weight of that story, if it sparked something deeper, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep these conversations alive. Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about what it means for us today. Like the video if it helped you see Rome with new eyes. Subscribe for more human stories from the past. And remember, history isn't just the story of nations, it's the story of people. People who made choices that shaped the world we live in. And maybe, just maybe, understanding them helps us understand ourselves.